Not a month goes by that we don't hear of a new DAC or headphone amplifier. Topping and SMSL are big offenders of the constant component release cycle. They saturate the market with so many variants that if you are easily swayed by marketing and reviewer hype, you'll soon be broke. Topping released their D50s DAC in 2019. The D50 has an interesting feature set that, to be honest, may not make a whole lot of sense to some. Appos Audio sent me the D50 to review and return. This is through our continuing collaboration. If you get a chance, check out Appos Audio. They have a growing list of products, a great return policy, and fantastic customer support. The D50 is $250. In a market where $100 DACs perform plenty good for most, what does the D50 bring to the table? Topping tried to pack a lot into the D50. This device is solidly built, and I do mean solid. I was surprised by its weight and finish after I took it out of the box. The D50s is not made of plastic, it is all metal. The only plastic components are the power and toggle switches. The D50 has USB, Bluetooth, optical, and coaxial inputs. The only output is the RCA. The output level is 2 VRMS, which is perfectly normal and achieved by sub-$100 DACs, by the way. The D50 is a new stack system for topping. They have a matching headphone amplifier and a linear power supply. Topping clearly envisions audiophiles going all in for the 50 series devices. To entice customers, Topping is using dual ES9038Q2M DACs. These are among the latest DAC chips from Sabre. The D50 can render exceedingly high-resolution audio, including DSD. MQA, however, is not supported. The D50 allows for op-amp rolling. You can open the chassis from underneath where 4 screws keep the unit together. Obviously, the DAC has an LCD screen that allows you to see volume output, input, and filter options. The included remote does exactly what the jog wheel and power button can achieve. To activate the menu system without the remote, you merely have to press the power button once, then use the jog wheel to scroll through the options. Of course, when discussing audio components, we cannot forget the measurements. Yada 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 blah blah blah, it measures just fine. Audio Science Review is renowned for hyping measurements. ASR is a worthy asset because they can confirm certain aspects about a product, the output power, output impedance, and overall noise performance, for example. But there is a broad line between what you can and what you cannot hear. So while the measurements may seem impressive, and ASR certainly thinks so, there is nothing here that would make an iota of audible difference. Overall, the build and features are fine. I'm not a fan of Bluetooth, but I'm glad that Topping included all major codecs from SBC all the way to LDAC. Consequently, if you're going to stream from a source, you should use the highest quality codec you can. I am, however, cognizant that shoehorning some features is simply a way of increasing price. Op-amp rolling caters to a niche community. Whether you will hear a difference is debatable, and whether that difference will be significant is also questionable. I have rolled op-amps in a few devices and rarely hear any meaningful alterations. The DAC filters are as useless on the D50 as on any other DAC. DAC filters make no audible difference whatsoever. Then there's the dual Sabre DACs. Typically, you accept the cost of dual DACs if they are in a balanced output system. That is, you get 2 DACs for channel separation, which then ends in balanced output. But not so on the D50. There is no balanced output. I can hear some zealous audiophiles complaining that dual DACs make for a more pleasant experience. Fine, whatever. I'll bet in a blind test between the D50's dual DACs and the same DAC in a single system, you would not be able to tell the difference. Speaking of hearing the difference, let's talk a little of the sound. To test the sound signature, I paired the D50 to my Monolith Liquid Spark, Schiit Magni Heresy, and Rupert Neve headphone amplifier. I played among the D50, SMSL Sanskrit, Schiit Modi 3, and Soncause LAQX D1. I used the Avantone Planar and Allo Audio S4X as my test headphones. So that we all have a basic understanding, let's quickly talk about the equipment. The Liquid Spark, Heresy, and Rupert Neve are all neutral amplifiers. The Sanskrit, Modi 3, and Songcause are neutral DACs. The Songcause is probably the smoothest sounding of the three, but not by a wide margin. The Modi and Songcause both have 2 VRMS from the RCA, and the Sanskrit has 2.2 VRMS. The Avantone Planar and S4X are the most neutral headphones I have heard. The Planar has a sub-bass roll-off, but otherwise accurate sound reproduction. The S4X has a slight sibilance peak and a marginal treble accentuation. The D50 requires 5-volt power, and there is a separate power input for that. Let's cut to the chase. The D50 is neutral. There's not a hint of accentuation anywhere in the frequency range. If you want honest representation of the original track, then the D50 is as capable as any other neutral DAC. The bass is accurately presented. On the Avantone Planar, I heard the same sub-bass roll-off that I would expect from any other setup. And that's a good thing, since if the D50 elevated sub-bass, the Planar's performance would be different. On the S4X, the sub-bass sounded perfectly neutral. On both headphones, mid-bass impact seemed tight with natural decay. As I listened through my test playlist, I did not hear any distortion or noise in my bass tracks. The rumble in Mountains from the Interstellar soundtrack was clear. Hip-hop tracks like Uproar, New Patek, Reel It In, among others, seemed to maintain a subwoofer effect while it still rendered impactful mid-bass. There was generally some melding between sub-bass and mid-bass, but nothing out of the ordinary. The mids are neutral. The S4X has a sibilance emphasis that is just slightly above neutral. This is most apparent in Orla Gartland's song Why Am I Like This? The D50 did not alter the S4X's performance in this regard. When I switched to the Avantone Planar, the mids were neutral and smooth without the sibilance hike of the S4X. Guitars, drums, pianos, vocals, all mid-centric instruments sounded accurate. They tended to have accurate natural decay and transients. Switching back and forth between the D50 and the other DACs, I heard marginal differences here and there. For example, on the Songcause, the mids appeared to be marginally smoother. Some of the grain that is present in a few recordings is less obvious on the Songcause than on the D50. However, on the Sanskrit, the performance was very close to what I heard on the D50, that is, the grain was marginally more obvious than what I heard on the Songcause. In contrast, the Modi tends to accentuate grain marginally. Consequently, you have a gamut of presentation. The Songcause is the smoothest, the Sanskrit and the D50 more obvious than the Songcause, and the Modi the most obvious of all in regards to grain in some vocals. Nevertheless, there is no hint of distortion or peakiness on the D50 or any of the other DACs that I tested. Turning to treble response, again, the name of the game is neutrality. The D50 was on par with the Songcause, Sanskrit, and Modi. Some people talk about DACs having excellent or poor treble extension, and such commentary can become a bit confusing. The way I look at it is this. Does a DAC provide neutral, natural, full treble response? That is, do instruments sound muted or muffled or veiled, or do they sound accentuated? All of the DACs I compared in this test performed similarly. Again, the Songcause appeared to be marginally smoother than the rest, the Modi marginally provided slightly greater treble response, and the Sanskrit and D50 were about the same. Horns and brass always were full in all the DACs. Cellos and pianos had true timbre and decay. As far as detail is concerned, this is an area where I could find no differences at all. The D50 did not make the electric buzzing in Fly from the City, or the intakes of breaths in Superposition, or the multiple vocalists in Want You Back more clear than the other DACs. Indeed, details did not jump out on the D50. Every single DAC I tested here had the same amount and kind of details. There are some DACs or DAC amp combos that make significant alterations to detail retrieval. The Chord Mojo is a perfect example. Its particular tuning often melds sounds and causes muffled details, and on some occasions a loss of slight details. Other products, such as the Monolith THX Portable or Desktop, or even the Earman TR amp, tend to slightly accentuate clarity. This results in hearing a bit more detail in some tracks and usually slightly greater separation of instruments. The D50 is neither the Mojo nor the Monolith or the Earman. It is instead standard, no different from the Sanskrit, Songkaz, or Modi. Overall, my impression of the sound signature is that the D50 performs admirably well. But it is nothing grand, nothing which demands immediate attention. If you've heard the Songkaz, Sanskrit, or Modi, you may hear slight variations on the D50, but that's the key. Slight. It is fair to say that the D50 tries to present the recording without coloring it. In this regard, it does just fine, no better or worse than the others I tested. I think you will hear far greater differences with your headphones. Whenever people tell me they are trying to achieve a particular sound through a DAC, I usually advise them to think more about their headphones or IEMs. That is where the brunt of the force of alterations will be. Yes, there are some devices which color the sound at another level. The Wu Audio WA7, the Mojo, the Jolita FX DAC, and hifi Zen DAC all add their particular sound signatures that are noticeable. The D50 is not that type of product. Consequently, if neutral is your taste, then the D50 performs as well as the Sanskrit, Modi, and Songkaz, with minor differences here and there due to tuning. Bluetooth connection requires you to install the included antenna. You need to activate Bluetooth through the menu. Once active, go to your source device and select the D50. If your device allows you to choose Bluetooth codecs, then select the highest quality you can. Since the D50 supports all major codecs, it makes sense to connect with the best one you can. Wired connection works as you would expect. You can connect mobile devices to the D50. Since the DAC requires a separate power supply, you merely need to connect to your Android or iOS device with the appropriate data cable and relevant adapters. As for overall Bluetooth sound quality, look, I've said this many times and I'll repeat here. The D50's dual DACs don't help with lossy Bluetooth codecs. When the original connection is of mediocre quality, which Bluetooth is, no DAC will suddenly make it better. Just because you add a good DAC to the chain doesn't make the original transmission not lossy. It's like these stupid all-to-DSD options now found in some VO devices. It's a gimmick, and when you upconvert MP3 or 16-bit audio to DSD, you're not adding information that was lost in the original compression. So, let's just leave the Bluetooth performance at this. The D50 has no problem connecting over Bluetooth. When I buy DACs, I look for something unique. Either I want a particular sound signature or features I am going to use. I will give you a few examples. I have the Songkaz LAQX-D1 because I wanted a neutral portable DAC with balanced XLR output. My features requirements were very specific and the Songkaz delivered. I bought the Jolita FX DAC because I wanted a tube DAC amp with a smooth sound signature and a Burr Brown DAC chip. I have the Shit Modi and SMSL Sanskrit because I wanted cheap neutral DACs that were no fuss. So where does the D50 fit in? Well, it doesn't have balanced output. It doesn't have a rare DAC chip. It isn't cheap. It doesn't offer a unique sound signature. The D50 performs quite well. Do not take my lack of boisterous promotion as a sign that the device is not quality. I am merely telling you that the D50 does nothing that is not already achieved by cheaper products. Let's start with the sound signature. As I said, it is neutral. I know some people who reviewed the D50 made statements that the DAC is detailed, has extended frequency range, is fast and hard, but smooth and gentle. There's one particular reviewer who claims, and I quote, "The D50S has a clear and transparent presentation with lots of details on the macro and on the micro scale, and it sounds expensive and definitely not like a $250 device." What exactly is expensive sound, and what does a $250 device sound like? I completely disagree with statements like the one I just quoted. There is no such thing as a device which performs like its price. Price has little to do with performance. So while I appreciate those who show affection for a particular product, I simply cannot follow in their footsteps. The D50 is a neutral DAC. There's no audible coloration to the original sound, and when paired to neutral headphones, the D50 sounds very similar to the Sanskrit, Modi, and Songkaz. You may hear slight variations among the 4 DACs as you do A/B tests, but that's just the tuning more than anything else. What is absolutely certain in my experience is the following. First, the D50 does not provide any greater detail than the competitors. In some cases, there may be minor differences in clarity, but it was never consistent, nor was it so great that it was immediately apparent. Second, the D50's sound signature is not better than the other options. There are minor differences in sound here and there, which you may or may not be able to tell or like. The most important fact, however, is that some DACs make a meaningful alteration to sound, while others less so. For example, the Chord Mojo is such a warm-sounding DAC that when compared to anything more neutral, it is a marked difference. On the other hand, the difference between the AudioQuest Cobalt and the Eco Zerta is so minor that you could confuse one with the other in a blind test. Here, the D50 is not so different from the alternatives that it sits on its own class. As far as sound signature and overall quality is concerned, the D50 is nothing exceptional. Maybe that is a positive, since much cheaper products are built and perform as well as those which cost double the price. But in the case of the D50, the barely different performance compared to the Sanskrit, Heresy, Songkaz, or Modi underscore the stark price difference of the D50. Consequently, when it comes down to technicalities, all I really want to know is why am I paying $250? This brings us to value. I don't see it. I really don't see it. I'm sorry, I wish I could tell you that you should jump up and buy the D50, but I cannot force myself to do that. Yes, the D50 has great build. Yes, it has a healthy selection of connection options. Yes, it does its job quite well. But what does it do better than the $80 SMSL Sanskrit or the $100 Modi or the $220 Songkaz? Well, if you compare features, then you could potentially justify the D50's price. None of these other products have Bluetooth, so if that matters to you, then I suppose that's one reason. If you think you may use Bluetooth once in a while, then it is merely a convenience. And if it's just a rarely used convenience, then why not just get a $40 Bluetooth receiver for your rare Bluetooth needs? On the other hand, if you think Bluetooth is a feature you would use often, then you really should find a DAC that provides the highest quality codecs. Here, the D50 does that. You get all the major Bluetooth codecs and easy connection to your source. There's nothing to be excited about when it comes to the D50's filters and measurements. The DAC filters are as useless on the D50 as on any other DAC. Their measurements are irrelevant since you cannot hear any noise or distortion anyway. So who really cares if the measurements are twice as low as you could possibly hear? When it's beneath your ability to distinguish, it's the end of the line. I think the sound differences among all the DACs I tested in this video are so minor that it's just really a wash. You may like the overall sound signature of the D50 more than the other options depending on your setup, and that's a personal preference that you're entitled to have. Someone might say that the D50 puts everything the Sanskrit, Songkaz, and Modi have into one neat little package. Well, that may be true to an extent. If you subscribe to the op-amp niche, then I think that the D50 is the only DAC in this price range which lets you do that. If you absolutely want Bluetooth, then the D50 has it. If you want small form factor, then the D50 wins that battle too. So while I do not hear or see any meaningful justification for the inflated price, somebody else might. Maybe we should look at the D50 from a different perspective. If you are a new audiophile or someone on a budget, then I think you should ignore the D50. You will get equally good performance from products that are half the price. If you want a neutral DAC with RCA connection, then the SML Sanskrit, Topic E30, and Shit Modi give you more value. If you want balanced connection with neutral sound signature, the Songkaz LA-QXD1 is a cheaper alternative. It has the same DAC as the D50, although only one of them. Now, before anyone reminds me that the D50 has double the DACs, I want to emphasize that that does not result in double the performance. I don't get the purpose of having two DACs in the D50 when you're still only outputting through RCA. Frankly, I have never heard any channel imbalance from the song cause and nothing from the AKM DACs in the SMSL Sanskrit and the topping E30. And whatever alleged sound benefits to dual DACs in the D50 are not obvious to me. I never heard anything remotely shockingly different from the D50's dual implementation. If you are an experienced audiophile with some expensive gear, then you might be enticed by the D50. If $250 is not a big investment for you, then the D50 does perform competently, but I simply cannot see why you would want to pay more for gimmicks. The menu system in the D50 doesn't outclass the Sanskrit or the E30. The failure to provide a balanced output immediately puts the dual DAC feature into a suspect position. A 4.4mm output would have been perfect here. It's a small form factor which would theoretically fit within the casing. The requirement of a separate power source means you're always tethered to the wall or a portable power bank. The E30 and Sanskrit are not restricted in this way. Consequently, if you're an experienced audiophile, you may look at the D50 and ask what it does that cannot be achieved elsewhere. Then there's the group of audiophiles who simply want Bluetooth streaming support. And this is where the D50 really shines. The D50 has all the major codecs for the best connection. This is the only meaningful difference between the D50 and the competitors I tested here. So if you simply must have Bluetooth, then I could see you justifying the D50. The D50 does not have any faults. I cannot point to any manufacturing defects, sound irregularities, or blatant misrepresentations by topping. The only standout feature for the D50, the only feature that has obvious effect, is the Bluetooth. Everything else is either questionable, such as the dual DACs, or already done in cheaper products, such as output and sound performance. Is the D50 a must-buy? Absolutely not. I think you get far better value elsewhere. But will you make a mistake if you buy the D50? No, I don't think you will. You will have a very pleasant experience on the D50, and you will pay a premium price for it.